Okay, so recently I've spoken about big media networks and the power that they have. I forget the precise title I chose for that video, but I certainly touched on CNN and the culture wars and everything around that. So this one's perhaps a little bit more specific, but it definitely relates, and there's definitely overlap. And that is the nature of how viral videos on the internet are treated by big media outlets. Now, it's just a fact of the world that we live in that when a video goes viral, it's kind of like a Frankenstein's monster. That is to say, it kind of takes a life of its own, and more often than not, truth gets lost along the way. And that's very problematic because it means that people can be falsely portrayed, and it means that a lot of other people, like a lot of other people, can judge a situation as something that it is not. And that in turn can result in um, both vocal abuse and potentially actual abuse. So it's quite a troubling development, I think, with the rise of social media. And it's very, very hard to counter because even if the big networks were more responsible, and I don't think they're anywhere near as responsible as they can be, which I'll come to in a minute, but even if they were, then you'd have private individuals sharing it and falsely reporting it and so on. But anyway, there's a few incidents I want to talk about which relate to this phenomenon. So the first one is something that's went viral in the last few days, and it shows a young woman doing aerobics exercises in Yangon, excuse me, in Naypyidaw in the capital of Myanmar during this coup d'etat that's just happened. And her name, I believe, is King Min So. No, I'm not good with Burmese pronunciations, so apologies if I'm saying that wrong. Now, most people just find it a bit of a quirky video, as do I, because she's doing these aerobic sessions as basically the coup is taking place behind her. Now, apparently, unfortunately, she's got some abuse because people think she's kind of trivializing of an obviously serious event. Whether people think she's pro-military or anti-military or what, I don't know. But she's apparently received some abuse for this, which has led her to have to show other videos in which she's in the same place doing the same moves. And she said that military exercises were routine in the capital, so she didn't take it out of the ordinary. Um, now that's not quite the same as the other example I'm going to give here. Um, but it's just an example of where something becomes viral, and for the most part, this particular one is harmless. People just see it as a bit quirky and a bit like of an unusual situation. But if people are kind of misconstruing this young woman, I think there's no reason why she should be lying. It's a pity. But it definitely is. It will be one of the images of this coup. Now the other incident happened 2 years ago. I think it was somewhere in New York State. Can't remember the precise location if I'm honest, but it involved a young guy by the name of Nick Sandman from the Covington High School, and he was a Trump supporter. He had the MAGA hat on, and basically he and another group of young guys from this high school decided to go to a pro-life demonstration. Now, whilst there was a confrontation with Black Israelites. The Black Israelites are a hate group. They're designated that way by the Southern Poverty Law Center. They're very anti-Semitic. They're black supremacists. They're a pretty unpleasant bunch, actually. So this group of young white guys, predominantly white guys, got into a confrontation with the Black Israelites. I don't think there was any physical violence, but there was a good bit of name calling from the videos I've seen. It mostly came from the Black Israelites. Covington High School boys done some kind of gestures, but that was about it. I didn't see them make any racially charged statements or anything like that. Anyway, in comes an elderly Native American activist by the name of Nathan Phillips. And from his point of view, he was trying to defuse attention. when I saw this, because I followed the story at the time, I thought that was a bit dubious because his way of diffusing the tension was by getting drums, or I don't know what the specific word would be for those particular drums, but kind of the tambourine, I guess it would be. And he was banging it basically in the face of this young guy, Nick Salmon, who was kind of giving a defiant smile. But that was about it. He certainly wasn't being aggressive, but I was suspicious of that argument that he was trying to diffuse tensions by, putting a musical instrument in someone's face. That looked provocative to me. It looked like it was, what's the point of that? It's kind of, you're invading his personal space, and it's just, anyway, that's that. That's where, that was the situation. But here's where it really got quite ugly. Powerful networks like CNN, I distinctly remember Don Lemon, um, and others on CNN, you know, and this is where I was talking about punditry and the problem with punditry. They were, in no uncertain terms, basically saying they'd like to kick his ASS, the young guy. And think of the narrative of this. The Washington Post and others were doing it as well. I've just seen a video actually in which the Washington Post was pretending to be neutral and show both sides, but at the time that's not how they reported it. Anyway, think of the narrative of it. Privileged young white man bullies honorable old Native American. That's pretty much the angle they were taking. Problem is, it's not the reality. And it's a reminder of why it's so dangerous to take a snapshot of a video or take a segment of a viral video and present it as facts. Now, if it's private individuals sharing stuff around, I would say that's reckless and they shouldn't do it without, providing more context or whatever. But when it's powerful networks, I think it's to be quite blunt about it, I think it's disgusting. I think it's an abuse of power. We get it in Britain as well. I've seen situations a few years ago. There was a young South Asian woman who was photographed at a rally with, I think it was the English Defence League, and it showed her defiantly standing up to them. Except what had actually happened was the camera angle wasn't quite what it looked to be. What had happened was one of these ADL activists, and I've no time for them, but it was a single photograph that was taken out of context. Then she was made out to be some sort of national heroine, and she hadn't actually done anything other than be there. She hadn't, if you looked at the whole situation, and there's many other examples of this. But what I think is unforgivable and what I think is a clear abuse of power is when big networks take a segment of something and they push it to further their political agenda. And they can deny it, but that's absolutely what they do. Now, as it turned out in this case, the Covington High School uh, protests, for want of a better term, Nick Salmon actually sued CNN and the Washington Post, and I think he got a settlement from CNN. He didn't get anything from the Washington Post. I think it's good in a sense. However, he also, by the way, spoke at the Republican National Convention. He addressed the incident. It's good in a sense that he got a payout from it, but I personally think his lawyers should have went further. I think they should have demanded a public apology from these networks. And if that public apology wasn't forthcoming, they should have pushed further. As it turned out, he settled out of court. I think, frankly, they got away with it a little bit because other than him, speaking at the incident at the RNC, they never apologized. They never said we got this wrong and we should have reported the full context. Um, but it's a good example of where something is so clearly taken out of context. And I'm sure there's right wing equivalents. I'm sure there's times that Fox News has done the same thing or something similar. I have to say, this is more domain of the left from what I have seen. Um, where on the right you might get crazy conspiracy theorists like QAnon, which I think are deranged. I think they're dangerous, right? Just for the record. I also think that the left is guilty of turning situations into something that they're not and fueling flames in doing so. And I think it's pretty shameless and disgusting that they do that. If they were saying there was this confrontation that involved this person, this person, and this is what we know about the situation, that would be okay. That would be valid reporting. But to angle it like, the way they did was not only bad reporting, it's actually quite dangerous. They could have put that young guy in danger because we've seen that there is political violence in America from both the right and the left. Anti-fat activists have shown that they're willing to use violence. There was a camera guy, Andrew Ng, um, who was known for his conservative views. He was basically beaten to a pulp by far left thugs. So anyone who thinks, oh, it's only the other side that does it, they're deluded. The whole world's talking about what happened at Capitol Hill, and that's understandable. I really have no time for these deranged, conspiracy pushing, hardcore Trump voters. I've no time for them. And incidentally, I probably wouldn't agree with a lot of Nick Sandman's views. I don't know what his views are on the Capitol Assault thing. That really isn't the point regarding this case. My deepest concern is it's a David and Goliath situation, and I find it deeply troubling that we get these viral videos that just get blown out of proportion, and people won't step back and think, well, is this really the whole story? Are we seeing everything here? So many people just jump on a bandwagon because it confirms their own politics. So, for example, if they see a minority person supposedly standing up to a white supremacist, then that's going to be portrayed that they're a hero. Except it's not always that simple. Sometimes it might be that simple, but all I'm saying is people should just do a little bit more research. Um, as for big publications, they've got no excuse, you know. And I think his lawyers should have pushed for a public apology. One of the things I really dislike most about the likes of CNN is their arrogance. They never admit when they get it wrong, or if they do, it's a bit like when newspapers get it wrong, they put it in small print on page 30. I think if you make a major mistake, if you smear someone as a big publication, you should have the integrity and honesty to correct that and make that an important thing. Just accept that you got it wrong. Their failure to do that shows an arrogance, but also an abuse of power. And this is where there is a lack of trust. Now, apparently, in recent weeks, CNN's overtaken Fox to be the most watched cable news network. There's probably a lot of reasons for that. But with that power comes responsibility. And now that Joe Biden's in office, it can't be a situation that CNN just continues to uh, push an agenda because they so clear they do. They can say, "Oh, we're not interested in being neutral; we're interested in the truth." But when you distort situations, that is not being truthful. And I'm not saying that it's all fake news. That's not what I'm saying. Not at all. They don't lie necessarily, but they do cherry pick and they do take things out of context more often than not. It's dangerous. And I think when people see this, it destroys trust in the media, but it causes a huge deal of anger for anyone who's objective and anyone who looks at this and thinks, well, wait a second, that is not the whole picture. It's just not. It's not good enough to kind of say, oh, well, this is both perspectives after the fact when you've reported it in a certain way, because then the damage is done. That needs to be the way big networks should handle a viral video is they should say, this video is going viral, this is what we know. But you get the likes of, and what I've noticed, you get this very much in the British media now as well. They're trying to be hip and woke and fit in with the young people. By a typical headline would be person A is owned by person B, or this white supremacist is shut down by a noble black woman. That's a typical headline these days. Not verbatim, but it's along those lines. And it's just sloppy, lazy journalism. But more troublingly, it's sloppy, lazy journalism to push an agenda. And that's an abuse of power. It's fine having an OP just make it clear that it is an OP. But when you have an entire publication pushing an agenda, taking things out of context, it's a big problem. One last thing, and this is a practical point. I've been in a few demos in my lifetime. I've been in a few protests over various things. Um, but we've seen in recent years how things can get heated. And this isn't just an American phenomenon. We've seen it in Britain as well. You know, if you're in some sort of protest or counter protest, just be aware that people have cameras, people have phones, and the nature of the world that we're in is that can go online, and if it's taken out of context, it's going to be an uphill battle to kind of clear your name. So I think it's best that people avoid direct confrontation where possible, because the chances are, in that sort of demonstration situation, people are just going to yell at each other. There's not going to be a reasonable dialogue more often than not. There's just going to be yelling. There's always a potential for violence. Yes, people should exercise the right to protest peacefully, but I think people should also be aware of how things can be taken out of context. And you know, you can imagine a scenario where someone has been physically attacked and then they retaliate, and then someone just starts filming the retaliation. This is why it's so dangerous, and is why people need to be very aware of their own behavior, even if you're defending yourself. It's a hard thing, but it's probably better to walk away because I remember Jordan Peterson made this point in when he was talking about the counter demonstrators or the demonstrators outside one of his lectures. He advised his supporters to be very, very careful about how they respond. It's unfortunate it has to be that way, but all it takes is someone to start filming, and and you know, people frankly are sheep. They like to follow the crowd. They don't like to think for themselves. Too many people, and it's a bit cowardly actually. But if you're a reasonable, intelligent person, you need to just step back a little bit and think, well, is this the whole story, or at least is it as much as we're going to know? It may not be possible to know every single detail if you weren't there, but at least then don't jump to conclusions. That's all. And I know that's, you know, it's a pipe dream to think that things will change because unfortunately this is the power of social media. But I do think there needs to be at least some blowback, at least some counter to say, well, actually, maybe this isn't what people think it is. And as for big publications, editors who knowingly report something in a certain way that is not the whole story, I think they're shameless. I think that is bad journalism, and I'd have no problem saying that to them. Um, but I really cringe when I see the likes of the BBC and I trying to be hip and trying to be woke by using dumbed down language. You know, I have to say, if I was to make a generalization here, and this is a very, very broad generalization, journalism of the past versus journalism now, I'd have to say in the past it was more professional. I'd have to say that with the rise of social media, there has been a dumbing down, there has been a desire to be just snappy and woke and fit into the Twitter time frame, not time frame, you know, the word count. I think Twitter allows 30 words, but newspapers are rushing to be just very snappy and very, oh, we're woke, you know. This is definitely happening, and it's very sad actually. It's very frustrating, but it's also very sad because I think it's detrimental to journalism. You know, good journalism needs to be about um, first and foremost, truth. That is the single most important thing. It's not about being literal because there's going to be some situations that are not in equilibrium. So, you know, neutrality is not the issue, but truth is. And when big newspapers and networks report things with a political angle, it might not necessarily be a lie, but nor is it the truth. Certainly not the whole truth. And that is extremely, extremely detrimental. Why is it detrimental? Because it deprives the public of the full story, but also it potentially puts people in danger. It can destroy someone's entire reputation because something was taken out of context. And it disgusts me, to be honest. And unfortunately, you see it all the time. People see a little snapshot of a video and think it's the whole story because they can't be bothered to think for themselves and think, well, actually, maybe there's more to this. Anyway, that's it. So let me know your thoughts. But if you ever find yourself in some sort of demonstration, just bear in mind that this could happen. People could be filming it, and you need to really have self-control. If someone's provoking you, don't get into a big fiery thing with them. Just try and walk away if you can. That is not surrender. That's being the adult. That's being practical. Um, and I know it's easier said than done when when you're hearing stupidity. One last point, if anyone's made it this long through my video, I'm seriously thinking about demonetizing all my videos and just making the videos because I'm sick and tired of YouTube and the very selective um, monetization procedures. I'll leave it there. Thanks for watching.